Hello there! We are going to embark on a coffee brewing speed tour wherein we explore 7 different ways to make coffee at home. We're going to be fast and efficient today. We're going to brew some very tasty things, but most importantly, we're going to have some fun. So, without further ado, let's begin. Before we begin, there are 3 things we are going to need for all of our recipes. First one, of course, is going to be a scale. For most of these recipes, I'm going to be talking in terms of ratio, simply because most of these brewers come in different sizes. So by giving you the ratio rather than exact amounts, you can scale your recipes up or down depending on the size of your brewer. We will need a hot water kettle, preferably a gooseneck for control. Lastly, we will need a coffee grinder, firstly so we can grind our coffee fresh, but also so we can ensure we are using the right grind size. Today I'm using the Malkönig X64 SD. This is a lovely single doser that I actually brought from home. This has been my home grinder for the last couple of months, so let's make some coffee. Method number 1 is going to be a pour over classic. We are starting off with the V60. To brew on the V60, you need the brewer itself. This comes in 2 sizes and either one will work. You will need a mug or some sort of carafe. You will need your scale, of course, and you will also need a conical paper filter. The V60 is a versatile brewer when it comes to ratios. You can really go wherever you want. However, I think the most tasty range, especially when you're starting out, is 1:15 to 1:16. So that's 1 part coffee to 15 parts water, or you can go all the way up to 1 part coffee to 16 parts water. We are aiming for medium to medium fine on our grind size. Something that looks a little bit like this. Using our preheated water to 205 degrees Fahrenheit, we're gonna rinse our filter. This does a couple of things. It rinses the filter, which is kind of the less important thing here, but additionally it adheres the filter to the sides of our brewer, and also it begins to heat the brewer. Coffee in, slight shake just to make sure the bed of coffee is flat, and then we tare our scale. Now we're gonna start our timer and we're gonna bloom our coffee. So I'm gonna add 50 grams of water in a spiral motion. We're gonna leave that to bloom, let that CO2 gas start to escape for about 30 seconds. For my second pour, I'm gonna add the next 100 grams of water. Your scale should read about 150 in total. I'm gonna pour in another spiral motion, so start in the center and then in a nice, even circular motion, work my way towards the edges. I'm not looking to rinse or pour along the sides of the filter, just maintaining near the edge, working my way back in a spiral if I find I'm coming too close to the edge. It's now 1:30. I'm gonna pour in the remaining weight of our water, which is that final 100 grams. So your scale should read 250, and this should finish draining right around 215 to 230. This is how I brew coffee every single morning. It is a pretty foolproof and also, I think, very easy recipe. Let's move on to our next method. Our next method of brewing utilizes what I truly think is one of the most versatile coffee brewers, and that is the French press. Now, unlike the V60 that only comes in 2 sizes and is pretty easy for me to give you exact amounts on, French presses come in all different types of sizes. So really and truly here, we are going to be relying on our ratio, which is a simple 1:15 ratio. For our French press, we don't really need a big inventory. We need the brewer itself, we need our scale, our water kettle, and that is about it. Now, a big difference here that we'll want to note is that we're going to be using a grind size that is a good deal coarser than we used on the V60. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'm using this grinder here. This is the X64 SD from Malkönig, and I want to take a second to give a huge thank you to Malkönig for actually sponsoring today's video. This has been my at-home grinder for quite a while, and it is truly a versatile little single doser. I say little because it's quite little as a grinder itself, which makes it great for fitting into small spaces. This is got 64 millimeter burrs in it, super tasty, like high clarity coffees that come off of this. But additionally, it's got a full grind size range. So we're gonna be using this for all of our coffees today, and we're gonna be exploring a pretty wide range of grind sizes, and this thing can do it all. So very grateful for them for sponsoring. If you want to learn more or pick up one of these yourself, you can learn more about that at the top link in the description. Now, for our French press, we are going to crank this quite a bit coarser. Not crazy coarse, but definitively coarser than we're using for our pour over brewer. We'll start by adding all of our coffee. Oh, and I just realized I lied to you. We do need one more thing for this brewer. Have no fear, it's nothing complex. We just need a spoon or some sort of stirring device. Now, for the bloom of our coffee, we are gonna add 2 times the weight in water that we have in coffee. So depending on what your dose is, multiply that and use that weight for your bloom. In my case, I'm using about 30 grams of coffee, so I'm gonna bloom with 60 grams of water. At this point, also start your timer. I'm gonna use my spoon, simply stir everything together lightly, just making sure all of those grounds are fully saturated. We'll now let that bloom until our timer reaches 30 seconds. At this point, we simply add the rest of our water. For this brew specifically, I'm using 30 grams of coffee, so that means we are taking our total water weight up to 450 grams. I'm gonna give this one final stir, and then we place our plunger back on. You can lower the plunger until it reaches the surface of the coffee, but don't press down any further. We will come back when our timer reads approximately 4 minutes and 30 seconds. I'll see you soon. We are now at 4:30. I'm gonna remove the brewer from the scale and let's plunge. We wanna plunge until our coffee bed is almost compacted. All that coffee should be pushed to the bottom, but we don't wanna press anything down once it's at the bottom. If we do, we might be liable to push even more fines and little grounds up into the bed of coffee. By bed of coffee, I mean the drinkable coffee on the top layer. Cheers. You know, even though pour over is my everyday method of making coffee, there is something so utterly delightful about the French press. It is full-bodied, it is rich, it is sweet, it is so delicious, but we have more coffee to make. So let's move on to our next method. Next, we are going to brew coffee on an AeroPress. To brew coffee on an AeroPress, you will need heated water, preferably in a kettle. You will need your scale, the primary body of the AeroPress, which does come into 2 pieces, the body and then the plunger. You will also need the lower filter cap and then a little AeroPress paper filter. We're gonna crank our grind size back to that medium fine territory, and then we're gonna be utilizing a 1:15 ratio once again. In this case, I'm gonna be using 15 grams of coffee to 240 grams of hot water. Of note, I'm using a pretty light roasted coffee today, so all of my water is at 205 degrees Fahrenheit. I like to add a tiny bit of water just to make sure that filter is stuck to the bottom of the cap. Make sure you always dump your rinse water. Now we're gonna simply add all of our coffee. Tare your scale, level your grounds, and then also make sure you have your spoon nearby. We're gonna start off by adding all 240 grams of our water off the bat. You will see a little bit of coffee drip down into the cup. That is totally fine, totally normal. We will stop that drip of coffee once we seal on the plunger. Give it a stir, make sure everything is incorporated, and then we place our plunger on. Now you'll notice that this plunger is at somewhat of an angle, but as long as a seal has been created, no more coffee is going to be dripping down to the bottom. We will straighten out our plunger and plunge down once our timer has reached 1 minute and 30 seconds. I'll see you then. It's now 1:30. Let's make sure that we remove carefully our brewer from the scale. Now we're simply going to straighten out the plunger and begin pushing down. This is slow and steady. This should take about 15 to 30 seconds in total. You can press until you feel the bed compact a bit or until you hear a slight hiss. And that is a cup of AeroPress coffee. There are many different ways that you can use an AeroPress to make coffee, lots of different recipes out there, but I think this is a nice, easy starting point. Cheers. Also, it's very tasty. Regardless, let's move on. We are officially at the middle point. I think we are making good time today. Now our next method of brewing is a pretty fantastical one. This is a siphon, and you do need a couple things for this. First of all, you need the entire siphon apparatus. This includes your 2 glass chambers, a lid, and then the cloth filter that is fastened into the brewer. You will need a small butane or denatured alcohol burner. Typically these come within the siphon kits. You will need some sort of lighter or way to start your burner, and you'll also need a spoon. You're probably sick of hearing me say it at this point, but we are going to be using a 1:15 ratio. We're going to start by adding our water to the lower chamber here. You can start with room temperature water. However, it will take probably 10 to upwards of 15 minutes to fully bring it to a boil as we need to. Or if you have a kettle, you can use preheated water. This is what I recommend doing. It makes this process that is otherwise rather monotonous a lot faster. Now we are going to insert the top chamber back into the lower chamber. However, we don't want them to seal. So you will notice that the entire brewer is at an angle here. This feels wrong, but it is very right. Simply light that burner and slide it underneath. Siphons come in all different sizes. In this case, I have a rather large one. We are brewing with about 500 grams of water. So in our case, for that 1:15 ratio, we are using 33 grams of coffee. We're gonna keep our grind size right in that medium to medium fine zone. Your grind size should look similar to that very first V60 brew that we did earlier. Now, we simply wait for a few minutes for this water to actually reach a boil, then we'll move on to our next step. Once we have a nice, happy little boil like we have here, we're now going to right this upper chamber, creating a seal between them. Almost immediately, you will see the water begin to move from the lower chamber to the upper chamber. You know, it's kind of funny, I brewed on this siphon earlier today, and obviously I did not do a good enough job cleaning the cloth filter because you can see a little bit of discoloration due to the coffee that it was previously in. I'm gonna use my phone as a timer. Once our water is in the upper chamber, I'm gonna start the timer and add all of our coffee. Toss that all in there, give it a stir, make sure that is fully saturated, everything is brewing evenly. Now, we're gonna pop the lid on and wait until our timer reaches a minute and a half. You will notice that there will always be a little bit of water left over in your lower chamber. This is totally normal, don't worry about it. Once we are at a minute and 30 seconds, all we need to do is remove the heat source and let the coffee drain down. Okay, once all that coffee is back down in the bottom chamber, we are good to remove the upper chamber. Of note, this glass chamber, now all of the glass chambers are very hot, so I highly recommend using either oven mitts or some sort of towel just to protect your hands. Do not do this barehanded, you will regret it. Cheers. So delicious, so tasty, made even better by the fact that this brewer looks like something out of a chemistry lab. But let's maybe move to something a little bit more simple. Method number 5 today is the Vietnamese Phin brewer. This is a small dripper that makes a very highly concentrated cup of coffee. Of note, I highly recommend using Robusta coffee if you are using this dripper rather than your more traditional specialty Arabica. Y'all are gonna be so excited about this. We are not using a 1:15 ratio. This time, we are using a much shorter 1:8 ratio. Phins come in lots of different shapes. I have a kind of small to medium-sized Phin. I'm gonna be using 15 grams of coffee to 120 grams of water. Nice big Robusta beans. Now we are gonna be taking our grind size to probably the finest it has been today. One of the really nice things about this grinder is that it's pretty much an all-in-one. You can do everything from dial in espresso to make cold brew on it, and it's stepless, which gives you really fine control, especially when you're in that espresso area where really, really small adjustments really matter. Something that's kind of in this territory. Okay, we're gonna remove this little metal upper filter out of the Phin and then load in our coffee. I like to do this off of the cup just because sometimes you get a couple grounds that fall through the bottom due to the fact that this doesn't have a paper filter. It's all metal, and I like to just make sure if that happens, it happens on something that isn't my drinking cup. Now we're gonna put back in our top filter. We're gonna screw it down just until it touches the surface of the coffee, but no further. We don't wanna compress our bed. All right, our water is preheated. This is a darker roasted Robusta, so I'm using a water temperature that is around 190 degrees Fahrenheit. We're gonna start off with blooming the coffee slightly, so I'm gonna add 50 grams of water to begin with. The Phin is a very slow brewer. We're not gonna have our finished drain time until between like 4.5 to 6 minutes in total, even for a cup this small. So don't be surprised if it takes a while to see it drip. It's very normal. We have ground very, very fine to make the type of coffee that this brewer excels at. After about 30 or 40 seconds of blooming, we're gonna add the remaining weight of water. So we're gonna be taking up our scale to that full 120 grams. If you find that there isn't enough room in your brewer yet, not enough water has dripped through already, you can always do this in smaller amounts as more room in the brewer becomes available. Now we're simply gonna put on our little lid and let this brew. Again, this should take between 4 to 6 minutes in total to finish dripping through. Okay, that's about 5 minutes and we are right on schedule. Cheers. It's rich and concentrated and intense and so uniquely Vietnamese Phin coffee. I love it. I hope all of you have a chance to make it sometime. Regardless, 2 more brewers. We can do this. Let's continue. At long last, we find ourselves at the traditional Moka pot. This is another one of my favorite brewers just because of how tactile and traditional it is. And oddly enough, this is a brewer that I'm going to advocate that you don't brew with a scale with. I don't say that very often, so it kind of feels like a treat here. But truly, this is a brewer that is made to use without any additional tools. You will need a stovetop surface, of course. You will need water, but you don't really need anything else. Moka pot coffee is traditionally brewed using a 1:9 or 1:10 ratio. However, these little pots themselves, no matter what size you get, are already sized to meet that ratio. All you need to do is fill up your basket with ground coffee. You don't want to compress it, just simply fill it to the top and then fill your lower chamber with water up to right below this valve. And those 2 measurements give you that perfect ratio. We are going back to our medium fine territory. Something that looks a little bit like this. As I mentioned before, one thing that's very important here is that we do not fill our water over this pressure release valve, so just keep an eye on it. Similarly to the Siphon, you can do this entire process with cold water. It'll just take significantly longer once it gets on the stove, or you can preheat your water, which I'm all about a little bit of like time and speed efficiency. So using preheated water, this will just speed up the initial heating process. Pop your funnel in. If you're using preheated water, your base is now quite warm, so use a towel, just protect your hands, and then screw on the top. We're gonna open up the lid of our Moka pot so we can keep an eye on the brew when that happens in a couple minutes. But otherwise, I'm gonna let this finish heating, and I will see you when something starts to actually happen. Actually, real fast of note, right now I have it on medium heat. However, as soon as coffee starts to bubble up into the top chamber, I'm gonna reduce it to low heat. All right, as soon as I see any coffee sputtering, I'm gonna close the lid and we'll take it off heat. All right, that's a sputter. We're done brewing. Now, Moka pot coffee, kind of similarly to the Phin, is a very concentrated cup of coffee. It's not of the same flavor intensity as espresso, but it's halfway in between there and filter coffee. So this can be a decent substitute for espresso if you'd like to make kind of a makeshift latte at home, but even on its own, it's very delicious. And also very, very hot. Well, actually, speaking of that, let's go to the other side of the spectrum. For our final coffee method today, we are going to be making some cold brew, specifically cold brew concentrate. Once more, this is going to be concentrated enough that you can use it in place of like chilled espresso shots, or you can dilute it out to whatever your preferred ratio of drinkable cold brew is. Tool-wise, this is pretty simple. You're going to need some sort of large jar or just frankly a sealable container. You will also need some sort of cloth cold brew bag. There are plenty different brands of cold brew bags out there. They all work about the same and they are all just about as good as each other. We're going to be making a large batch of concentrate today and we're going to be using a 1:8 ratio. So again, that's going to be 1 part coffee to 8 parts water. For grind size, we're going to be taking this pretty much as coarse as this grinder goes. So swing all the way back over to the other side of that grind size adjustment knob. And then, because we're going to be grinding a lot of coffee, I'm actually just going to grind it straight into my cold brew bag. Now I've got the water I need for this brew over here in this container, and it is at room temperature. We don't need it to be cold, but we also don't need it to be hot. Also, if you're curious, this is where I'm at grind size wise. As you can tell, we are quite a bit coarser than we've been all day. Once more, I've got my spoon nearby, and I'm gonna add initially to this bag about half of my total water. This doesn't need to be a precise science. We just want enough that we can make sure that all of these grounds are fully saturated. I highly recommend, even if you have a bag that has like sort of drawstrings on it, using your hand to make sure this bag does not collapse into your brewing chamber. So just ungracefully pour about half of that water. Now we're gonna use our spoon and just stir around in there. You don't really wanna scrape the sides of anything, but you do wanna make sure that there aren't any dry, compacted pockets of coffee that might not extract or get covered in water. Easy peasy. Now we just add the rest of our water. Now we can cinch up this cold brew bag, pop it right in there, and seal this. Now the brew time for this is very much going to depend on your preference for flavor intensity. This is something we're gonna be brewing at room temperature. You wanna make sure it's out of sun, it's out of like direct heat, but just on a counter in the shadow is perfect. I recommend letting this brew for about 18 hours in total. If you are someone who prefers a little bit lighter in flavor with your coffee, I would go for 12 to 16 hours. Or if you're someone who likes really strong, like very robust flavors, you can push this brew time out to a full 24. But usually 18 hours is about the happy spot. So with that being said, I will see you in 18 hours. Oh, don't worry, I'm just kidding. I already started another one of these yesterday. All there is left to do is remove our handy dandy cold brew bag. And now we have some lovely versatile concentrate that we can either turn into cold brew. I would recommend diluting this with a ratio of 2:1, being 2 parts concentrate to 1 part water. Taste it, adjust it if you need to. Everyone's preferences are slightly different, or you can use this cold concentrate as a pseudo replacement for chilled espresso shots. You can add 2 to 3 ounces, add a little bit of milk, and it's like a nice little refreshing pseudo latte. Okay, with that being said, I think those are all of our brewing methods for today. Again, I want to give a huge thank you to Malkunig for sponsoring today's video. The X64 is truly such a wonderful, versatile little home grinder. It's small, it can do the full range of coffee brewing. It's easy, it's quiet, it feels good to use. It's just a really, really solid choice. So again, I will link more information about this grinder down below. Highly recommend you check it out if you are in the market for a new grinder. With that, I've got a lot of dishes to do. So I'm gonna go drink some more of the coffees I have brewed today, and I will see you all later. Hopefully this was helpful, and as usual, my name is Morgan. You can find me here on YouTube plus Shorts or on Instagram and TikTok almost every single day. I hope you all have a great rest of your days. It's kind of fun that we're entering the holiday season, and I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye, everyone.